Hey guys, it's Courtney. I'm back here with another design team project for Not Too Shabby. This is the third card we are going to be using, the Oh My Whiskers stamp set by Honeybee Stamps. And again, creating a pretty simple card. For the fourth and final project, which will be up in just a couple of days, we are going to create a huge scene. So for the first three, we're keeping it pretty clean and simple. So I have a piece of Nina Solar White 80-pound cardstock here, and I am bringing out my Misty. And I'm just using two of the images from the stamp set. Going to go ahead and stamp that out with my blackout ink by Ink on 3. I did have to stamp this twice just because my ink pad is starting to go a little dry and I have yet to purchase a refill for it. So this is why I'm using my Misty so often. I also stamped this out onto a piece of Simon Says Stamp masking paper, and then I will go ahead and carefully fussy cut this out. I am doing just a little bit of ink blending in the background, so I do want to make sure that when I'm fussy cutting this, I'm cutting right along the outline of the image itself. I prefer to cut my paper down into smaller pieces. It just makes my fussy cutting just a little easier. So I will go ahead and line up my masks for both that large image as well as this tiny little butterfly. And I didn't worry about the little antennas or anything like that, or the handle of the little bucket. So I'm going to go ahead and take a piece of Post-it note tape just to mask out the bottom portion of the card where the ground would be. Then I am taking a stencil, and this is also by Honeybee. I will link it below. I'm going to go ahead and line that up so that the center of the little gradient there is right over top of my mask of my main image. Using shaded lilac distress oxide ink and a blender brush here, going to tap off onto a scrap piece of paper because I want this to be fairly light. So I'm going in with a pretty heavy hand closest to the image and then kind of fading my way out to the edge of the stencil, so that would be the lightest areas. Will remove my mask and then just take the tip of my scissors to help me remove my masks. It just makes the removal of the masks just a little bit easier. So I'm going to be using ARTEZA Everblend markers here, and all of these colors are from the 120 set. So this is the first real project I am doing with these markers since getting this 120 piece set. I am starting off with my lightest color and getting the paper saturated. I do find that getting the paper saturated completely with these markers makes the blending a little bit easier. So I went in with my lightest color and filled in the entire little bucket or pail here with that lightest color. Then going in with my darkest color, and I'm just going along the edges of this little bucket. Because this is a round object, my highlight will be in the center, so I am preserving that for that lightest color to go back to. And at first, with this darkest color and the second darkest color, I'm sort of kind of doing flicks. You're not going to get a flick like you will get with a brush nib, but you can certainly still flick with these. These are all kind of like cool gray colors. They're not named cool grays, but I kind of have them in order as far as warm grays and cool grays go. I do have a video, and I'll link it below, with the review of the markers, and I do have a color chart that I created that is very helpful where I kind of group everything together. So I was able to pull these out really easily, know that these blend well together. Once I realized that those flicks weren't really working for me too much, I just went in and colored straight. And I found that I got better results versus trying to do those little flicks. And I was still pretty much getting the same results that I was looking for just by kind of scribbling back and forth. You will also notice that I have created a shadow underneath the cat's little paws that are kind of hanging over the top edge of the bucket. And I just blended that out each time I went a little bit lighter. Finally moving back into that lightest color that we had started off with and just filling in that center area for that highlight. Next, we're going to move on to the coloring of the little cats. For the first cat, I'm going to switch over to some warm grays. And again, these aren't called warm grays, but I've grouped them together so that they all kind of go along with one another. And I am going to, again, saturate the paper with my lightest color, and going in with my darkest color, I'm not adding any shading. I'm just adding a few little stripes. And then I'll start to add a little bit of shading along with those little stripes. I want this to appear as if it's a black and gray tabby cat like mine, my Macy, and my Frankie. Speaking of Frankie, I've had a few comments and a few people reach out to me. If you guys have ever seen my videos before, a couple months ago probably, you will have noticed that Frankie was in a lot of them. Frankie loves to watch me color, and I've had a few comments and a few messages received from you guys asking about Frankie and seeing if he is okay. He is okay. He is alive and well, but we recently moved, and he has a whole new window to look out of, and lots of birds and chipmunks to look out, and the cat is seriously obsessed. He wakes up at 4:30 in the morning once he hears those birds chirping, and he doesn't leave that window until about 7 or 8 o'clock at night, when he can't keep his eyes open anymore. So he doesn't really come in the craft room too often anymore. He is definitely preoccupied, but he is happy and healthy. So thank you for all of those messages. Hopefully you guys will see him in future videos, maybe when I'm recording when it's raining or something, who knows. So moving on to the second cat here, I wanted this to be kind of an orangey cat. I accidentally started off with my mid-tone instead of my lightest color, so I just added a little bit of shading in places that I might not necessarily add shading, just to kind of cover that up, and everything turned out perfectly fine, but still started with that lightest color to get that paper saturated first. For this third cat, I want this to be a black and white cat, black and white spots. So I am going to start by coloring her or him with the same grays that I used for the bucket, only I'm only using the 3 lightest, just to add my shading, just to add shadows, because even white objects or white cats will still have shadows. So I'm coloring her as if she is completely white, just adding those shadows with those light gray markers. And then I'm going to go in with the black marker, and you can certainly add shading to his spots, but I just decided to go right in with the black marker and just add a few spots to him. I picked a light pink color to add just a little bit of color to the inside of his ears, as well as his nose, and the nose and the ears of this little orange cat. For the black and gray tabby, his nose would be black, just like my Frankie's. So going to keep that same pink out and bring in 2 more pinks, or one is more of a red, for this butterfly here. And again, starting off with my lightest color, just going to add a little bit of shading to the base, I guess, of the little wings, and where one wing is underneath the other, only using 3 colors here. This is a pretty tiny area, so I don't need to get too much contrast. So going to fill in this little, I don't know what it's called, the part of the bucket where the handle's coming out. Just going to go in with a black marker there and fill that in solid. And then I'm going to create ground. So I'm pulling out a bunch of my neutral tones from the 120 set. And I'm kind of starting off with a lighter color and then kind of moving around. I do find that the browns, or the neutral tones that you get in the set, all are pretty dark. There's not too many that are really light. So I wanted this to kind of fade off, kind of like you're grounding this, almost like a shadow, but brown. And I just was having a hard time achieving that result, because I didn't have a super light brown or a super light tan color or beige to kind of blend that out to nothing, basically. So what I ended up doing, after I used pretty much every brown that comes in the set, I ended up taking out my colorless blender, and I just went from the bottom up. I don't want to blend this out too much, because the blender moves the color, doesn't take it away. So this will kind of get all of these colors to mesh and kind of drag that color out a little bit further. And I was happy with that result. So next, going to go ahead and stamp my sentiment from the Perfect perfect sentiments stamp set with a VersaFine Onyx Black ink just on the top portion of my card panel. And the more I looked at this, the more I hated it. And it was the stencil. I should have never used the stencil, but I did. So I didn't really like the shaded lilac that I had going on there. So I pulled my masks out of the garbage because I didn't want to recut them. And I went ahead and lined those up again. And I'm going to go directly over the shaded lilac with tumbled glass. And I'm hoping that I like the blue a little bit better. So I just lined up my stencil, and this was really easy to line up. And then I went over the same way as I did before with that tumbled glass, concentrating a little bit more, or a heavier hand, I should say, in the center, and then kind of fading that out as I went over it. The Distress oxides are more opaque than the traditional distress inks, so it's easy to go over one color with another. It will pretty much cover it. It's not going to be truly tumbled glass. You're still going to see a little bit of that shaded lilac, but I'm okay with that. It does look a lot darker than it is on camera. The final pictures, you'll see how light that actually is. But that is it. Just added a few details with the white gel pen, and that is the card. I will leave all of the supplies listed below. Thank you guys so much for stopping by, and have a great day. Bye.